Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Deku adopted by Nana and Shigaraki? Part 1. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time let's get into the video. No, you cannot become a hero without a quirk. All Might tells a young Izuku Midoriya as his hopes are crushed by his idol. Izuku stands there, his heart breaking as his one last hope is extinguished. "I see," Izuku says as he begins to silently cry. All Might looks back and says, "If you want to help people, there are plenty of other ways to do it. You can become a police officer. They may get crap because the heroes catch all the villains, but it is a fine profession." All Might leaves without saying another word as Izuku sits on the roof and starts crying hysterically on the roof. After a few minutes, he goes home thinking about what has happened that day, with All Might and Bakugo saying, "If you think you'll have a quirk in your next life, go take a swan dive off the roof." Izuku opens the door to his home to find a truly horrendous sight. "Mom?" Izuku says, seeing his mom lying on the floor as he rushes over to her and starts shaking her, saying, "Mom. Mom, wake up. Mom." As she doesn't wake up, he checks her pulse and finds out that she has died. "Mom." Several hours later at a police station, Izuku sits in a chair crying and a detective comes out. "Izuku, my name is Detective Namasa Tsukauchi," the man says. Izuku keeps staring down at the floor, his mind wallowing in sorrow. "Do you have anywhere to go? Anyone to stay with?" Namasa asks Izuku. Izuku keeps staring down at the floor, his mind wandering. "If there is anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask," Namasa says as he turns to leave. "Did she suffer?" Izuku's voice rings out. Namasa turns around surprised and in a slightly startled tone says, "No, she dies quickly and painlessly from the heart attack. Honestly, I'd be surprised if she didn't die in a few seconds without a bit of pain." Izuku stares down and says quietly, "That's good, I guess." He wipes off the tears rolling down his face and says, "To answer your question, I do have somewhere to go, so unless there is anything else you need, I will be going." Namasa is shocked at Izuku's want to leave, but chalks it up to not wanting to be reminded of his mother as he shakes his head and lets Izuku go. As Izuku goes to the nearest train station and begins going to his destination, he thinks about his mother, the one person who believed in him. All of the cakes she made for him, all of the time she hugged him, all of the love that would no longer be there. He gets off of the train and starts walking towards his destination, still thinking about his mother, and as he walks up the stairs of the building, he knocks on a door. The woman with a hand over her face answers the door and grabs Izuku's throat, saying, "You have 5 seconds to tell me who you are and how you found this place before I turn your body to dust." "I am here to see my uncle. This is the address he gave me if anything were to happen to my mom," Izuku says as he claws at his throat, gasping for air. "Enough," Kurogiri says as he rushes towards the woman with the hand on her face, ripping her hand off of Izuku's throat. "I apologize for my associate's behavior, Izuku. It is a pleasure to have you here." "Thanks, Kurogiri," says Izuku as he walks forward towards the center of the bar. The woman with the hand says, "Wait, Kurogiri, you know this kid?" "Yes, Nana, I know him," Kurogiri responds. "How do you know him?" Nana says as Izuku gets in front of a TV screen and says, "Hey uncle, long time no see." The TV flickers on as All For One says, "Hello Izuku, my dear nephew, what seems to be troubling you?" "Nephew?" Nana screams, running up to the TV master. "What is the meaning of this? Why did you never tell me you have a nephew?" Kurogiri covers Nana's mouth as Afo responds through the TV saying, "My dear sister Inko requested that I never tell another soul in the criminal underworld that I had a sister or a nephew to protect them from any potential criminals or heroes who would use them as hostages against me. She even requested I change birth records and age documents to make sure no one would realize her relation to me. So tell me, Izuku, how is your mother?" Izuku stares down at the floor, tears rolling down his face as he says quietly, "She's dead." There was a pause on the other side of the television and then Afo said in an angry tone, "What did you say, Izuku?" "She died last night." Static begins flickering on the TV screen as Afo says, "What goddamn bastard murdered my sister?" Izuku looks up and says quickly, "No, she wasn't murdered. She died of a heart attack while I was at school. The police did an investigation and everything." There's a pause and using one of his many quirks, Afo teleports to the bar where Izuku is and bends down and hugs him. "I'm so sorry, Izuku." Afo says, "If I had just given her another quirk I could have saved her." Izuku looks up and says in between tears, "Don't blame yourself, uncle, you already gave her a quirk that let her live for 150 years and you continuously erased her birth records so the government never found out." After a few seconds Afo nods and says, "Thank you, nephew." After a few more moments of Afo and Izuku hugging, Izuku looks up and finally realizes the extent of the damage that has been done to Afo as he says, "Who did this to you, uncle?" Afo pauses and says, "All Might. We had a fight a few years ago and he inflicted these wounds upon me." Izuku looks up and says, "So that was the fight he talked about?" Afo looks down at Izuku as he explains his meeting with All Might, and after Izuku finishes his story Afo looks down and notices the burns on his nephew's arms and asks. Who did this to you? Itsuki Bakugo, Izuku replies, but please don't hurt him, he's the son of my mom's best friend and it would hurt her to see him killed. Afo looks down at Izuku and sighs gently, seeing the kindness that was so prevalent in his sister was inherited by her son. He shakes his head as he looks down at Izuku and says fine, we will not kill him out of respect for your mother. Please feel free to stay here as long as you like, but first I should probably introduce you to Nana. Afo turns around and waves Tamura over as he tells Izuku, this is my adopted daughter Nana Shigaraki. Her quirk is decay, she can destroy anything she touches with all 5 of her fingers. Nana walks over, finally shaking Kurogiri's hand off of her mouth as she walks towards Izuku and says, oh yeah, what's your quirk, Izuku? Izuku looks Nana in the eyes as he says, I don't have one. Tamura's eyes narrow as he says, so you're useless. Makes sense why master never talked about you before. Afo face twitches as he is about to defend his nephew, but Izuku says, you're right, I am useless. I couldn't save my mother, I wouldn't stand up to my bullies, I couldn't even make a single friend in my entire life. That's why I'm here. I don't want to be useless anymore. Izuku looks up at his cousin, a look of steel in his eyes, and says, do you have a problem with that? Nana blinks and chuckles saying, no, I don't. She looks at Afo and says, I like him. Afo smiles, turning to Izuku saying, now I understand that you used to love wanting to be a hero, do you still desire that? Izuku's face contorts in anger and he says, fuck no, I want to see all of those heroes burn. Please let me join you in your quest to destroy all the heroes. Afo smiles and says, of course dear nephew, but to do that you will need to be trained and you will need a villain name, so what will it be? Izuku gives it some thought and says. Call me Deku. The cell phone rings as a woman with long black hair and a long katana stands over the corpses of a bunch of criminals. The woman picks up the phone and says. Yeah, the job is complete, they're all dead. Good, Afo responds through the phone, I have another job for you. Okay, who do you need me to kill? The woman says while cleaning off her blade. This is not something that can be discussed over the phone, Razor. I am sending Kurogiri over to pick you up and I will explain the job when you get here. A portal opens behind the woman, evidently named Razor, and she says through the phone, understood, I will be there in a moment. She hangs up the phone and says, hello Kurogiri, been a bit, any hints about what the job is? Kurogiri shakes his head, I know better than to speak on this issue in length in an unsecured environment. He gestures to the portal and says, ladies first. Razor nods and walks through the portal. As she enters the bar, she scans the room and sees Afo, Nana Shigaraki, and some random kid. All for one, Razor says, ignoring the other 2 people in the room, what mission do you have for me? Afo gestures toward the young boy and says, you will be training Deku here. Razor's eyes narrow as she says, sir, we both know that would be a waste of my talents, after all this boy doesn't look more than 12 years old, how can he be useful? I'm 14. Razor looks at the young boy as he stares up at her, I'm 14, not 12. Razor chuckles and says, whatever kid, as she looks back at Afo and says. It's still a waste of my talents to train some nobody in the art of combat, I mean what even is his quirk? I don't have one. Razor stops and looks down at Izuku, noticing the way he is slightly shaking in fear as he looks up at her. She looks back at Afo and asks, why are you taking in a quirkless kid? Afo pulls out Izuku's notebooks from his jacket and hands them to Razor. Deku here has an amazing intellect and beepsis ability. Just by watching the news, he has been able to figure out the major strengths and weaknesses of nearly every hero in Japan. We simply need you to train him so that he can take advantage of his beepizes. As Razor is flipping through the notebooks, she is astounded at the amount of detail in the notebooks about every hero, and after a few minutes she looks up and says. As long as you're paying me, I guess I'll train him. She looks over at Deku and says, so what's your name, kid? Izuku Midoriya. Well, Izuku, let's begin, shall we? Razor says, gesturing him to follow her. 3 weeks later. Motherfucker. Izuku yells as he is kicked in the face with enough force to send him flying back 10 feet into a wall as he collapses to the ground. You need to work on your agility, kid, Razor says from the other side of the room without a scratch on her. I can tell you know where I'm going to hit you, but you can't react fast enough to dodge or block me. Izuku and Razor had been training non-stop for the past 3 weeks, only taking short breaks for food, water, and the inevitable need to expel the byproducts of the first 2 items. Izuku leans on the wall, breathing heavily, thankful for the short respite from combat as he asks, how do you expect me to dodge you when you move fast and when you only let me sleep for 4 hours a night? Razor shakes her head and sighs, saying, you think I'm the fastest opponent you'll ever face, kid? There are plenty of heroes and villains who can move far faster than I can due to their quirks, and you think they're going to give you the same level of mercy as I am? Izuku groans in pain as he gets up and says, no, they won't. Izuku gets back into the fighting stance that Razor taught him on his first day. Razor smiles and launches herself at Izuku, beginning the fight anew. "Are you sure this is the best method of training him, sir?" Kurogiri says, looking at the fight via monitor in the medical room where Afo was residing. He's been, well, to be blunt, getting his ass handed to him every day for the past 3 weeks now. It hardly seems fair. Afo smiles and says, "That's the point, Kurogiri. It is not fair at all. Tell me, have you ever heard of the 09B00 study done by the Russian KGB?" "No sir, I have not." Kurogiri responds. "It was an experiment to see how quickly one could increase one's physical abilities. You see, for 100 days they put their top operatives under grueling conditions such as these to see just how quickly they would either break or would have their physical abilities improve." Afo is interrupted by the sound of Izuku flying once again into a wall. After those 100 days, all of the participants who didn't quit had their physical abilities so enhanced that the most powerful of them could react quickly enough to dodge a tank shell fired at them from 10 miles away, and then fast and strong enough to be able to rush over to destroy the tank in one punch. If my nephew is going to be a villain, I want him as well trained as possible before I ever give him his first assignment. "Why not just give him a quirk to train with, sir?" Kurogiri asks. "My nephew has requested that I don't give him any physical quirks at all, besides the decreased aging one once he turns 18. He says he wants to prove to everyone that the quirkless are not useless as everyone claims them to be. I will be giving him several mental quirks though to help him as he becomes a villain, but those would be rather useless without the combat skills necessary to defeat any heroes that may interfere with our plans." Afo smiles and gestures to the video monitor and says, "But if you don't think that is a smart idea and that this training is useless, I feel the need to point out that Izuku just dodged his first attack from Razor." Kurogiri blinks in surprise and looks at the screen where Razor is congratulating Izuku on managing to dodge an attack. "It seems that this method may work after all, sir," Kurogiri says as they continue to watch the fight. Meanwhile, at the Bakugo household, "Also, why do people always add the letter U into some of these MHA names? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, I've seen a bunch of people spell Bakugo as Bakugo and Toya as Tuya. Why do people keep adding random letters to names anyway? Back to the story." Yes, no," she said in her will. She wanted a Paulownia would one. "Yes, that date works fine. You have a nice day as well." Mitsuki Bakugo hangs up the phone with the funeral company and leans back in her chair. She looks over to a photo of her and Inko back when they were kids and thinks to herself, "I'm so sorry, Inko." Wiping tears from her eyes, she calls up to Katsuki. "Hey Katsuki, you have Izuku's phone number, right?" "What did you say, you old hag?" Katsuki calls down. "Do you have Izuku's phone number?" "Yes, so what?" "Well, text him and say that we scheduled the funeral for his mother for next Saturday." "Don't tell me what to do, you old hag." "Do it right now, Katsuki, or I will go up there and beat your weak ass." Katsuki starts grumbling to himself as he takes out his phone to text Izuku. Conversation via text. Bakugo. "Hey Izuku, my mom wanted to let you know that we scheduled the funeral for your mother next Saturday at the graveyard near the Nezu Shrine in Bunkum Ward." Izuku. "Thanks for letting me know, Kaken. I'll see you at the funeral." Back at the League of Villains training facility. Izuku and Razor are still sparring when Afo's voice comes over the intercom. "Sorry to interrupt the training, Razor, but may I speak to Izuku for a moment?" Izuku looks over at Razor, who waves at him to go as she walks over to get a drink of water during the quick break. Izuku walks up through the labyrinthine corridors and eventually makes it to the observation room where Afo and Kurogiri are sitting. "Uncle, Kurogiri, what's going on?" Afo takes out Izuku's phone, turns it onto a messaging app and says, "The boy's mother who you told me about the other day scheduled your mother's funeral for next Saturday. I figured you'd want to know." Izuku nods quietly, eyes watering up as he thinks back on his mother. "Thanks, Uncle, I'll tell Razor that I need to take that day off." As Izuku walks back into the training room, Razor looks up at him and is about to tell him to get back to training, but sees he's crying and asks, "What's wrong, Izuku?" Izuku sniffs and says, "My mom's funeral just got scheduled and well, it just seems so definitive, you know, like before the funeral somewhere in the back of my mind. I can hope that she's still alive, and it's just yeah, let's go back to training." Izuku wipes the tears off his face and starts moving towards the training equipment, but Razor says, "Catch." Izuku turns around and catches a can of beer from the cooler next to Razor. "You do realize I'm underage, right?" Izuku says to Razor as she gestures for him to sit down next to her. "I know, kid, I wasn't going to start your resistance to different drugs training for another month or two, but this seems like a good time to start." Razor takes out a beer of her own, takes a sip and asks, "So want to talk about her?" Izuku takes a sip of his beer and says, "No, just thinking about her hurts. Trust me, kid, I've had plenty of friends and family members die, and the main way I found to be able to get rid of those feelings is by talking and with copious amounts of liquor." Izuku takes another sip of the beer and says, She was the kindest person I've ever known. She would support me in my old dream of becoming a hero, even though I'm quirkless. She would make me my favorite foods while I was sad. She would sing me to sleep every night even when she was sick. She was the best mother anyone could ever ask for. Izuku leans back, draining the whole beer and crushing the can in one hand. He leans forward and starts crying when, much to his surprise, Razor leans over and gives him a hug saying, "I'm truly sorry for your loss, kid." "Thanks, sensei." After a few more minutes of hugging and talking about Inko, Razor says, "Come on kid, let's get back to training." Izuku nods and tries to get up, but the world starts to spin around him as he says, "Ugh, what was in that beer? Only an alcohol content of about 10%. Isn't the average for beer supposed to be 5%? I did tell you I was going to do resistance training for you, Deku. Don't worry, by the time I'm done with you, you'll be able to drink 100 of those things and not feel tipsy in the slightest now." Razor smiles at Izuku as he gets into training position. "Let's continue, shall we?" Izuku nods and the training begins anew. 1 week and 2 days later. Of course, it's freaking raining, Izuku thinks to himself as he stands watching his mother's casket lowered into the ground. As the dirt is applied onto the casket, Mitsuki walks up to Izuku and says, "Please, if there's anything you ever need, please let me know." Mitsuki then looks back at Kitsuki and moves her head to tell him to talk to Izuku. Grumbling slightly, Kitsuki walks up and says, "Hey Deku." Izuku, I'm sorry about your mom, okay?" Still staring down at the grave, Izuku says, "Thanks Kaken." Both Kitsuki and his mother leave the funeral after a while of trying to get Izuku to stay with them, mainly Mitsuki, not Kitsuki, and after hearing many different variations of "I'm sorry for your loss." Izuku is the only one left at the funeral staring down at the now filled grave. "Hey, kid." Izuku turns around and sees All Might standing a few feet behind him. "What do you want?" Izuku growls at All Might. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I heard about the death of your mother from Detective Tsukauchi and I wanted to see how you were doing." Izuku glares at All Might and says, "Fuck you, All Might. First, you crush my dreams and then you fucking go and come to apologize at my mother's funeral, my mother who I wasn't there to potentially save because I was with you, so get the fuck away from me, you son of a bitch. I hope I never see you again." All Might stands slightly shocked at Izuku's words but nods and leaves saying, "Okay then, I'll go see you around, kid." After a few more minutes of standing and looking at his mother's grave, Izuku takes out his phone and calls Kurogiri to pick him up and they go back to the League of Villains training facility. 7 months after the funeral of Izuku Midoriya. "Begin," Razor says from a monitoring room overlooking the combat arena of which Izuku is standing in the center. Izuku dodges a blow from one of his 4 opponents, leaping into the air and twisting himself like a figure skater as he throws 4 daggers into the brain of his opponent, causing it to fall to the ground dead. The it in question is what Nana calls a Nomu, a large blackbird-like creature, each of which has the strength and speed of All Might. As Izuku lands on the back of another Nomu, he takes out a sword from a sheath on his back, decapitates it, and does a backflip to dodge another blow from a third Nomu, landing on the head of the last Nomu, which he uses as a trampoline as he launches himself into the air, landing on the ceiling of the training arena, using magnets in his shoes to attach himself to the ceiling as he takes a breath and then launches himself back down at the Nomu, still stunned from having its head used as a trampoline, and kicks its head, sending it launching off of its body and hitting the third Nomu, stunning it as he quickly decapitates his final opponent. "Well done," Razor says over the intercom, "you managed to defeat all 4 Nomus in 10:47 seconds, a 28-second decrease in your time from yesterday." Izuku turns towards the control room and bows, saying, "All thanks to your training, sensei." Razor smiles as she looks down at the boy no man standing bowing at her, his formerly weak stick figure-like body now having the lean build of a trained fighter from the months of training. "None of that now, you earned this victory. There are times to be humble and there are times to brag. This is one of the times when you can brag, Izuku, or should I say Deku." Izuku looks up and says, "Wait, you mean?" "Yes, my dear nephew, your training is complete." Afo's voice comes down through the speakers, "You have earned your villain name and status, now come and join us in the bar to celebrate." Deku smiles as he leaves the training arena and goes up to the bar to see Razor, Kurogiri, Nana, and Afo sitting at the bar. "Congrats on finishing your training, cuz," Nana says as she walks up and hugs Deku. "Now then, celebrate, Kurogiri, bring out the good liquor, let's get this kid drunk." Kurogiri sighs and says, "Nana, you know that he's been trained in being able to resist all manner of drugs even while in combat, so how exactly do you plan on getting him drunk?" "TCH buzzkill," Nana says as she walks back to the bar, grabs a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, and pours herself a glass. Afo walks up to Deku and says, "Congratulations, Deku, I knew you could do it." "Thank you, uncle." Deku replies. "I believe it is time for me to give you your own quirks." Everyone looks over and watches as Izuku bows his head and says, "Thank you, I promise I'll make you proud." "I know you will, Izuku." Now take my hand. As Afo extends his hand toward Deku, he reaches out, grabs it, and breathes in, expecting some type of feeling in his body, making him feel different. He looks at his body and says, "I don't feel any different." Afo laughs and says, "Did you expect to get some sort of euphoric experience out of getting a quirk or something? No, that's not how it works, it's just a part of you like you've always had it." Deku nods as Afo continues to explain each of the new quirks, because the author doesn't feel like doing the manga shtick of explaining it later in the text during a flashback. The first quirk I gave you is called Evaluate. It allows you to look upon a person or object and see their weak points via a red glow, with the more vulnerable the point the more it glows. For instance, if you were to use it on All Might, you would see a very bright red glow where I managed to destroy his digestive system a few years ago. The second quirk I gave you is called Perception, which allows you to sense all of your surroundings within a limited range of about 10 meters, though with more training, I am sure you will be able to increase that range to be much higher than 10 meters. The final quirk I gave you will be especially helpful for the assignment I am going to be giving you. It's called Memory Viewer, and it allows you to be able to discreetly view someone's memories by touching them and activating the quirk. Both Evaluate and Memory Viewer are active quirks, which means that you have to concentrate on them to be able to activate them, but Perception is what is called a passive quirk, which means that it will always be active, whether you want it to be or not. Do you understand everything I've told you, Deku? Afo's voice fades as he sees his nephew scribbling in his journal, muttering to himself incoherently as Nana looks over at Razor and asks, "So, how long does he normally do this for when he gets new information about quirks?" Razor shivers and says, "You don't want to know. It would probably be better to just give him a smack on the back of the head to snap him out of it." "Wait, what mission?" Deku asks in his normal tone. "Your first mission as a villain, of course." Afo says your mission will be to infiltrate the UA High Hero program and get as many of the students there as possible to join our League of Villains and to gain as much information on those who won't join our league as possible. How am I supposed to become a part of that program if I don't have a quirk? Don't they have a requirement about that? Deku responds. No, they don't, it's just that no quirkless person has ever tried to become a hero. So he lied about there even being a chance of me becoming a hero, Deku thinks to himself as Afo continues. There is also one perk that comes with this mission that should be a bonus for you. Afo takes a sip of his drink and says All Might is going to be a teacher this year and you'll get a chance to show him the error of his ways. Deku looks up and slowly smiles and says, well then I'm in, let's show that fucking asshole what when you claim to be something you're not. Nana puts her arm around her younger cousin and says, hell yeah Izuku, let's give that fucking asshole what he deserves. Deku starts laughing with Nana as they both start drinking and playing Mario Kart against each other. As the night draws to a close, Izuku thinks to himself about his new quirks, and as Nana leaves he remembers something. Hey Nana. Izuku says. Nana turns around and says. Yeah, what is it, Izuku? I can't believe I haven't asked this yet, but I'm curious, what's your villain name? It seems like something I should know if we work together in the field, you know. Nana looks up at the ceiling and says, you know, I don't think I ever gave myself one. I know Blight, because that is what I'll be. A blight on all heroes who dare stand against me. What do you think? Izuku looks at her and smirks, saying, did you just think of the first word that's a synonym for decay and use it for your villain name? Nana glares at Izuku and throws a pillow at him from a nearby couch. Hey. Izuku says, blocking the pillow from hitting his face, I didn't say it wasn't good. Heck, I think it's the perfect villain name for you, just a little on the nose, okay? Oh, you have no room to complain about being on the nose, cuz. Nana says, smiling at Deku, all you did was choose the name that you were bullied with, like that's entirely original. Deku laughs slightly sadly as he looks down and says, yeah, I guess you're right. Nana's smile goes away and says, I'm sorry, I know it's a touchy subject, are you sure you don't want me to kill him? No. Deku yells, looking up at Nana, I may hate him with all of my being, but that will make Aunt Mitsuki sad, and I don't want that after all she did pay for my mother's funeral. Nana smiles and walks away to her room saying, Fiini, I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku, and I promise I'll beat you at every game of Mario Kart we play. In your dreams, cuz. Izuku yells after her as she goes to her room, as does Deku, both of them getting ready for their part in Afo's plans. 2 months after Deku gets his quirks. So I'm finally going to UA, the old me would have been so excited about this. Izuku thinks to himself as he walks through the gates towards the entrance exam. As he looks around at his fellow students, he notices a girl and a boy in glasses talking, a man with weird blonde hair talking in broken French, a girl with horn speaking English in an American accent, and a pink girl skipping towards the building. As he is looking at the pink girl, however, he notices that she missed one of her skips and is about to fall onto the ground. Before he can stop himself, he rushes over, moving faster than the human eye can track, and grabs her shirt, stopping her from falling. Are you okay? Izuku asks as he pulls her back up towards him slightly too hard as she lands on his chest, causing them both to blush as she has her head on his chest. Yeah, I'm okay. the girl says as she is blushing profusely from the closeness of the two of them. There was an awkward pause between the two of them as they realized that everyone was looking at them. The girl says anyway, thanks for keeping me from falling. My name is Mina Ashido, what's yours? Oh, I'm Izuku Midoriya, Izuku says, trying very hard not to freak out over being in contact with a girl his age. Nice to meet you, Izuku, Mina says, smiling happily, getting over the previous awkwardness quickly. Are you here to take the hero entrance exam? Izuku puts on a fake smile and says. Yep, I'm here to prove that the stereotypes are wrong. Mina looks at him quizzically and asks what stereotypes. That the quirkless can't be heroes, Izuku replies as Mina's eyes widen slightly in shock as she realizes that the man who just kept her from falling was quirkless. It quickly goes away as she smiles and says. Well, I wish you the best of luck in the exams, then Izuku. Thank you, Mina. Izuku says as she walks away. God, she's pretty. Izuku thinks to himself as he walks to the exams. As Izuku takes a seat near the back of a lecture hall with the rest of the homeschooled students, he hears a voice call out, for all you examinee listeners tuning in, welcome to my show today. The speaker was revealed to be none other than President McQuirk. Voice can generate a loud noise that can incapacitate opponent's weakness. Cannot travel through the ground. Izuku starts muttering about all the strengths and weaknesses of President Mick as the people around him look at him with thinking about what a weirdo he is. Now everybody say hey. The room was silent except for one poor soul in the back who felt bad for President Mick and said hey quietly. Wow, tough crowd today. Oh well, are you all ready to hear the rundown for the practical exam? More silence. I'll take that as a yes. President Mick says, his enthusiasm not dropping despite the lack of responses. You will all be conducting a mock battle simulation in one of our replica city districts. In these cities there will be many robotic villains for you to face, the easiest of them being 1 point and then 2 points and then 3 points. In order to pass you will need to destroy as many of these robots as you can, while also being heroic. That means no knocking out other examinees or stuff like that, you dig me? Even more silence until the man Izuku had seen earlier with the glasses stood up and said, excuse me sir, I have a question. Hit me. President Mick replies. On the printout you've listed 4 types of villains, not 3. With all due respect, if this is an error on official UA materials, it is shameful. We are exemplary students, and we expect the best from Japan's most notable school. A mistake such as this won't do. The glasses kid then turns around and points toward the back of the room. Additionally, you with the messy hair, you've been muttering this entire time. Stop that. If you can't take this exam seriously, then leave. You're distracting the rest of us. Izuku glares down at the kid with glasses and calls out, at least I bothered reading the entire handout. It says clearly on the back that the final robot is worth 0 points, hence why President Mick didn't mention it, because it is simply useless to bother trying to fight it, because it isn't worth anything in the exam. Thank you, examinee number 7567, for answering the question for me. President Mick calls out, it is true that that robot is worth 0 points, and hence worthless to fight. But don't worry, there is one of them on each battlefield, so you likely won't have to deal with it for the majority of the test, unless you're really unlucky. Now then, everyone report to your assigned combat zone, and remember to go plus ultra. As everyone leaves for their assigned combat arenas, Izuku hears a voice call out, Oi Deku. Why the hell are you here? Izuku sighs as he turns around and says, hello Kaken. You quirkless loser, how dare you come here to try to become a hero? Do you want to end up like your mother? Izuku looks at Bakugo as everyone else in the training arena looks at the two of them and says, trust me, I'll be fine. Look, you useless Deku, you will never be a hero. It's time for you to accept that and leave. Bakugo leans back to punch Deku as a hand grabs his hand and says. Look here, the rules clearly state that there is to be no attacking your fellow competitors, so cease this at once. Izuku looks at the man who saved him and says, your question boy, right? Look, I'm sorry for calling you out during the lecture, but in all fairness you also yelled at me. Glasses kid lets go of Bakugo's hand and says, no, I must apologize, for if I read the pamphlet as thoroughly as you did, I would have not needed to interrupt the lecture and call you out. But it was still highly rude to be muttering during the whole lecture. Izuku shrugs and says, sorry, old habits die hard. Bakugo shakes Glasses' hand off of him, turns around and says, why are you defending the worthless Deku? Glasses responds, if I didn't keep him from getting hurt, how could I call myself a hero? Bakugo snorts and says, even a quirkless loser like him. How dare you say that this boy is quirkless just to bully him? Do you even have any proof? Izuku puts his hand on Glasses' shoulder and says, no, he's right, I am quirkless, so go ahead Kaken, yell all you want, I don't care, I will get into UA despite being quirkless. Glasses' eyes widen as Bakugo glares at Izuku and he walks away toward his training center. Are you really quirkless? Glasses asks as soon as Bakugo is out of earshot. Yep, but don't worry about me, I can easily handle myself. Izuku replies. You fool, you could easily die during this. The robots are incredibly deadly and powerful. It is foolish of you to take this exam, you should quit now to avoid injury. Izuku rolls his eyes and walks away, going to the combat arena supervisor and asking, excuse me sir, is it possible for me to keep some of my gear for the exam? The supervisor turns around and says we normally don't allow it, why is it necessary for your quirk to work or something? No, I'm just quirkless and I would like to be able to have gear that will allow me to take down the robots. The supervisor stands shocked at the thought of a quirkless person taking the exam, but just nods slightly as he watches the kid walk away towards the arena. He turns on his comms and says, recovery girl, be prepared to have a serious case coming your way. There seems to be a quirkless taking the exam, and I'm not entirely sure if he will be able to survive the whole exam. There's a what? Lad King says in the observation room overlooking the exam. It seems we have a quirkless hero applicant this year. Nezu says it is nice to know that even those without powers have a want to help people. Good intentions won't do him any good if he's dead. Snipe says, scrolling through the applicant logs trying to find the student the supervisor was talking about. There we go, it seems the quirkless applicant is named Izuku Midoriya. Crash. All of the heroes look over to see All Might dropped his plate that he had loaded snacks onto on the ground as he says, what he's applying here? Yes, why Toshinori, do you know him? Nezu asks. He's the quirkless child I told you about, the one who I told couldn't be a hero. All the heroes shift uncomfortably as they remember All Might telling them about the incident he with the quirkless child and the subsequent death of his mother. Oh, I see, Nezu says, well in that case maybe he'll surprise you and manage to pass. It would be nice to see a quirkless hero out on the streets, it may even inspire some of the discrimination they face out in the world to cease. All Might sits down in his chair and hopes to himself that he won't have to interfere in the exam to save Izuku. After all, he indirectly caused the death of his mother and he didn't want the blood of another person on his hands. Not again. Back in the combat testing zone. Izuku arrives at the entrance to the mock city, noticing the people mumbling behind his back, saying things like, is he really quirkless? And he should leave, he's going to get hurt. But as he arrives at the front he sees the girl who was talking to glasses at the entrance and Mina come up to him. Hi, it's nice to meet you, I'm Uraraka Ichako, and I just need to know, are you really quirkless? I mean, we overheard the kid earlier, but he seems like a jackass, so I just need to know. Uraraka asks. Hello Uraraka, nice to meet you, my name is Izuku, and to answer your question, yes I am quirkless, but don't worry about me, I promise you I'll be fine. Oh hey Mina. Izuku says, blushing slightly. Hi Izuku, Mina says, running up to him, so you're ready for the practical test? Hello UA, are you ready for the test? I hope so, because we are starting right now. What did you expect, a countdown? That's not how real battles work. Now go. 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 Everyone starts running past Izuku as he simply stands there watching everyone enter. Uraraka and Mina look back and wonder why he isn't moving. They notice Izuku stretching slightly, but they look away as they have to concentrate on their own scores. As Izuku walks forward stretching, he looks around and notices a 3-point robot getting ready to attack any potential stragglers. As it prepares to attack, Izuku mumbles to himself, well, time to go to work. Moving at incredible speeds, he rushes towards the robot, takes out his sword from his sheath and slices it in half at its exact weak point that he saw using his evaluate quirk. Leaping off of the body of the decapitated opponent, Izuku launches himself like a human pinball in between buildings. He quickly catches up to the rest of the applicants and quickly slices through robot after robot, using each of them as a trampoline to launch himself to his next target. Meanwhile, in the observation room. What is this kid? Snipe says quietly as he watches Izuku zips through the combat zone, racking up points like fat you eat sushi. Within the first 3 minutes of the exam, Izuku had passed the record for the entrance exam by 35 points without a single rescue point. I don't know, but it's making me all warm inside. Midnight says. He either is lying about having quirks or he was trained so hard that we have nearly nothing to offer him. Aizawa says as he watches Izuku masterfully slice a 3-pointer's heart off and then kick it through the head of one of the 1-pointers. All Might stares at the screen and says he may be amazing in combat, but look at how he's fighting, he's not relying on anyone else and constantly getting in the way of others' attacks. We may not need to train him much in combat, but we certainly need to train him in team tactics and leadership if he wants to be a skilled hero. That may be true, but it may take some convincing on our part to show him he needs to rely on others. After all, he is going through these things faster than even you could in your prime, All Might. Vlad King says. That may be true, but we haven't released the 0-pointer, yet it is entirely possible that once he sees that he will realize that he can't defeat anything on his own. Ectoplasm replies. Or he destroys that too, and it will be even harder to convince him. Aizawa rebuts. Now let's just watch the trial. After all, it shouldn't be long before we release the 0-pointer, so let's just enjoy the show. Nezu says as they all quiet down and watch the massacre on screen. Back in the combat arena. Hey, you two doing okay point-wise? Izuku calls out to Mina and Uraraka as he lands next to them after racking up at least 200 points. In all fairness, when moving at that speed, details such as small numbers tend to be missed. I've gotten 45 points. Mina says. 28 here. Uraraka says. That's good, it should be more than enough for both of you to pass. A large crashing sound causes Izuku to dodge out of the way as a large piece of rubble traps both Mina and Uraraka. Holy shit, Izuku says as he looks up and sees what has to be the zero-pointer. Standing at least 300 feet tall and easily 50 feet wide, it looked like something out of an old Godzilla movie, smashing through buildings and causing everyone to run very quickly in the opposite direction. Izuku looks up at the robot and is about to go fight it when he notices that it's about to step on Mina and Uraraka. He quickly rushes forward and grabs the two of them and moves them out of the way of the robot. Both of you get ready to run, I don't know how long I can hold this thing off. Mina blinks and says hold it off. How can you hold it off, that thing is the size of a freaking mountain. Izuku shrugs and says I'll figure something out along the way. Before they could object, Izuku launches himself into the air and lands on the zero-pointer's arm and starts running up it, slicing everything he can as he goes. Damn, this thing is tough, Izuku thinks to himself. I've sliced through enough wires that I should have at least turned off something, but it's still going along just fine. Izuku senses the other hand coming in towards him and thinks to himself shit. As he jumps through the gap in between two of the fingers of the large hand coming down at him and lands on the other arm and quickly runs up onto the robot's shoulder. Izuku smiles as he finally reaches the robot's weak point. He takes his sword and plunges it directly into the motor control box of the robot. A few seconds later, Izuku realizes that he probably should have thought this through better as the robot begins to fall towards the ground. Well, I'm dead, Izuku thinks to himself as he closes his eyes and starts falling towards the ground. However, as Izuku closes his eyes, he feels someone enter the zone of his perception quirk and he opens his eyes to see Uraraka jumping off a roof at him. What are you doing? I told you to. Izuku stops talking as he feels his gravity being turned off as he simply hovers in midair as Uraraka lands in a large puddle of pink gel-looking liquid. Release, Uraraka says as Izuku feels his gravity turn back on and he lands in a large puddle of pink liquid. As Izuku falls out of the puddle, he looks over at Uraraka and Mina and says thank you for saving me. Mina smiles and says no problem, after all you did just save us from that giant robot. Uraraka meanwhile is looking down at her shoes, blushing and says yeah, don't mention it. Alright everyone, your 10 minutes are up. The test is now officially over. Present Mick's voice comes over the speaker. We thank you all for participating in the UA Hero Course entrance exam and recommend that anyone who needs healing report to Recovery Girl for treatment. Izuku starts walking forward toward the recovery center, talking to Mina and Uraraka, laughing and joking as they go. Several hours later at the League of Villains hideout. Hey everyone, I'm back. Izuku says as he enters the bar. Hey cuz, how was the test? Nana calls over from the video game she's playing. The written portion was ridiculously easy, and for the practical, every robot except for the zero-pointer was weak enough to be cut in half in one strike. It was like playing one of your COD games on easy mode. Nana rolls her eyes and says well, in that case I assume you aced it. They told me I broke the record set by All Might by about 250 points, so I guess that could be considered acing it. Nana looks over from the game and smiles, saying nice job cuz. Just for that, I think I'll be kind enough to let you beat me at one game of Mario Kart today. You say that as if I don't beat you half the time already, Izuku replies exasperatedly. Nana rolls her eyes and goes back to her game and calls out, oh by the way, Master wanted to talk to you, said it was about introducing you to our second spy in UA this year. Izuku looks over and says okay thanks, I'll be back in a bit to whoop your ass at Mario Kart. In your dreams cuz, Nana calls out as Izuku walks into the back area of the building. Ah, Izuku, welcome. Afo says as he is sitting in his chair, allow me to introduce you to your new partner at UA. Izuku looks around and says I can sense them, but I don't see anyone else here. That's because that's my quirk, you idiot. Izuku turns around towards the sound of the voice only to see nothing there. Allow me to introduce you to Toru Hagakure. She will be your partner at UA this year. I'll leave the two of you alone so you can get to know each other and your cover stories, Afo says as he leaves the room. After a short awkward pause, Toru says so you're the record breaker, huh? I was impressed with the taking down of the zero-pointer. Thanks, Izuku replies. You really should have gone for the elbow joint rather than just slicing the arm willy-nilly through. It would have completely disabled that arm. I was trying to leave that arm mostly active after all. I needed the robot to think that it had a chance to save its arm, so it would attack with the other arm rather than protecting its shoulders. Fair answer. Another awkward pause. So invisibility, that's a good quirk, Izuku says. Only if you can turn it off. I don't even remember what I look like. Dang, that's rough. Yeah, that's why I agreed to sign up for the league. All for one said his doctor can potentially modify my quirk so I can turn visible again at will. So why did you join? Izuku ponders for a moment, wondering how much to tell her, so he simply says all for one is my uncle. Izuku senses Toru's eyes widening as she says, I am so sorry sir for questioning you and bothering you with my issues, I didn't realize that you are. Stop. Izuku says, I am not going to reprimand you for simply trying to talk to me. After all, we are going to be comrades together at UA. Toru nods as she looks up at Izuku and says, thank you for understanding sir. Also stop with the sir thing, either call me Izuku, which is my actual name, or just call me Deku while out in the field. Okay Izuku. They talk for a few more hours about their backstories until they both go to bed to prepare for their first day as spies at UA. Hello and welcome to your first day at UA. My name is Izawa and I will be your homeroom teacher. Says a man with long black hair as he walks in the door. Now I am supposed to be taking you to the orientation, however I believe in doing something more practical. Everybody follow me outside. Everyone gets up out of their seats and walks outside with Mr. Izawa, where he calls out and says, today we will be doing a quirk apprehension test in order to test out how strong each of your quirks are. Now since the discovery of quirks, the government has tried treating like everyone as equal by forbidding anyone from using their quirks in normal school tests, but quite frankly this is dumb. After all, not all quirks are created equal. Mr. Midoriya, would you please come forward? Izuku walks forward and Mr. Izawa says, however occasionally pure training can pay off. After all, the person who got the most combat points in this exam is Mr. Izuku Midoriya here, and he is quirkless. There are slight gasps and muttering from around the class, but one voice calls out above all the others. What, how'd that worthless Deku get first? Bakugo yells. Mr. Bakugo, you will very quickly learn that I do not accept the bullying of my students. I will let you off this time since it is your first day, but if you call your peer worthless again you will personally deal with me. Izawa replies, glaring at Bakugo. Izawa turns and hands a ball to Izuku and says, now Mr. Midoriya, how far could you throw a ball back during grade school? Before I began my training about 30 meters, Izuku replies. Izawa nods and says, let's see how well you do now then. Izawa steps back and lets Izuku throw the ball. Izuku takes a few steps back, tossing the ball gently in his hand, and winds back to throw the ball and begins to run forward to throw it. As he is in the final step he feels his perception quirk disappear and thinks to himself, so he thinks I'm just hiding a quirk. How well then he's going to be surprised it seems. As Izuku lets go of the ball it flies out of his hand, traveling well over 300 meters, surprising everyone especially Izawa as Izuku turns and sees that Izawa's hair is standing on end and chuckles and says. You really thought I was lying about being quirkless, Eraserhead? There are many things that many people around the world will lie about. Being quirkless is not one of them. Izawa nods and gestures for Izuku to go back in the line as he turns and says, that was very impressive Midoriya, thank you for the demonstration. Now we will begin the exams for the class as a whole. All of you line up in a single file line and get ready to participate in the 8 tests that we shall be doing. Those are the ball throw, a 50-meter dash, grip strength tester, a standing long jump, repeating side jumps, a distance run, sit-ups, and a seated toe touch. Feel free to begin whenever you are ready. Izawa turns and walks away but pauses as he says, oh, one more thing, the person with the lowest score gets expelled. Everyone gasps in shock as Iida says, Mr. Izawa, that is unfair, we have all earned the right to become a student here at UA. How could you expel students with such an unfair trial? You earned the right to enter this school, not the right to stay in it. Izawa says, if you can't beat at least one member of your class, then you have earned your expulsion. Now then begin your tests or I will simply expel those who don't participate. The students begin grumbling as they go and begin participating in the tests. Everyone starts with the ball throw test, as most of them get within the 100 to 200 meter range. There are a few outliers however, with Bakugo getting 705. 2 meters with his explosions, Sho Todoroki getting 600 meters using her ice, and of course, Uraraka getting infinity with her zero gravity. The next test was the seated toe touch, which everyone passed, as well as the sit-ups after that. The next test that was actually challenging was a 50-meter sprint in which Bakugo and Izuku got paired together. I'm going to kick your ass, Deku. Bakugo yells at Izuku as he rolls his eyes. 3, 2, 1, go. Izawa says as he stands observing the track. Bakugo begins using his quirk to launch himself across the track and he feels so confident in himself beating that worthless Deku. That is until he looks up and sees Izuku at the other end of the track with his name being called out. Izuku Midoriya won. 25 seconds. Bakugo reaches the end of the race a few seconds later with a time of 4:23 seconds, shocked that Deku beat him and fuming with rage at the fact that Deku beat him. The rest of the race results mostly average around 7 to 10 seconds, but Iida puts on a good show with a speed of 3. 0.4 seconds and show Todoroki with a speed of 4.10 seconds using her ice. The next test was the grip strength test, which Shoji won with a grip force of 540 kgs, and Izuku managed to get a grip strength of 300 kgs. The next test was the standing long jump, in which Izuku cleared the sandbox as well as Uraraka, who used her quirk to become weightless and then gently jumped and swam through the air to the other side. The last two tests, the repeating side jumps and distance run, were both uneventful enough to where the author couldn't figure out how to make them sound interesting enough to write about. After all the exams were over, all of the students reported back to Mr. Ozawa, who said, "Congratulations on completing the exam. Here are your rankings based on how well you used your quirks in tandem with the tests, or in Midoriya's case, how well he did using his physical skills. If you look at the board, you will see your rankings." All of the students looked up at the board and read the results, which were: first place, Momoyaoi Rozu. Second place, Sho Todoroki. Third place, Izuku Midoriya. Fourth place, Katsuki Bakugo. Fifth place, Tenya Iida. Sixth place, Fukamiji Tokoyami. Seventh place, Mizo Shoji. Eighth place, Masahiro Jiro. Ninth place, Ichako Uraraka. 10th place, Ijiro Kirishima. 11th place, Mina Ashido. 12th place, Koji Koda. 13th place, Rikido Sato. 14th place, Sayu Asi. 15th place, Yuga Aoyama. 16th place, Hanta Siro. 17th place, Denali Kaminari. 18th place, Kyoka Jiro. 19th place, Toru Hagakure. 20th place, Minoru Mineta. No. Mineta starts crying as he sees his name at the bottom of the rankings. "I can't be expelled. It's the only way I'll ever be popular with the girls." Everyone in the class looks at Mineta with differing levels of intrigue and disgust, and Ozawa walks forward and says, "Congratulations everyone on taking the exam, and especially those in the top 5. Now then, all of you report back to the classroom and pack up to go home." Ozawa slowly walks away before turning back and saying, "Oh, one more thing, I was lying about having the person with the lowest score being expelled. That was just a way to ensure that you all tried your hardest on the test." "What?" Everyone but Izuku and Momo says. "Didn't everyone know this? I thought it was fairly obvious. After all, no school would give a teacher permission to expel one of his students on the first day," Momo says quietly. "No, we didn't, and how dare you not tell us?" Kaminari says. "Yeah, I mean, all that added stress could have just as easily broken us as having us improve," Mina adds on. "If we told you, you would have not had the added pressure of trying to not come in last, then you might not have performed as well," Izuku says, causing everyone to look over at him and Momo to look over at him gratefully. "Either way, it really doesn't matter now since the test is over, though I do imagine that there will be another one soon. Anyway, I have go catch a train ride back home, so I'll see you all tomorrow," Izuku says as he begins to walk away with Toru, leaving a few minutes later and meeting with Izuku and Kurogiri in the back alley as they teleport away back to the LOV headquarters. "Welcome back, cuz. How was your first day of school?" Nana says as she smirks at Izuku as they come back through Kurogiri's portal. "Haha. It was fine. No one thinks I have a quirk since I got 3rd place, since Eraserhead was using his quirk on me for at least 3 of the trials, so that's good. Unfortunately, I could not use the memory quirk on anyone yet to see if we have a chance of recruiting them, but I do have notes on a few of the quirks of the class." Nana smiles and says, "That's good, but save it for the weekend meeting. In the meantime, Kurogiri, would you mind cooking some dinner while I beat the shit out of my cousin at Smash Bros?" Kurogiri nods as Izuku walks towards the couch and says, "In your dreams, cuz you may be better at me in Call of Duty, but you will never beat me at Smash Bros." Izuku pauses, turns around, and calls over to Toru. "Want to play? We have like 8 controllers." Toru stands shocked as she slowly says, "Are you sure? I mean, I am simply your underling, and with both of you being my superiors, I—" "Stop," Izuku interrupts, putting his hand on her shoulder. "In my mind, I may be your superior during missions, but while here," he gestures to the bar they were standing in, "we are all equal." Toru looks up at Izuku and after a few seconds says, "I thank you, sir. If you insist, I will join you in playing, but I must warn you, I am very good at King Deaded." Izuku smiles and says, "Great. Maybe you'll actually present a challenge to me, unlike Miss Hands over there." "Hey. That's Madam Hands to you," Nana says as she smirks at Izuku and tosses a controller to Toru. As Izuku sits on a chair facing the screen, Nana grabs Toru and pulls her onto the couch next to her and says, "Okay, here's the deal. We team up to take out Izuku first, and then we fight each other, agreed?" Toru looks at her, blinks and says, Sure." Nana smiles at her and they start playing. They play for 2 hours until Izuku and Toru decide they need to go to bed. They never manage to hit the cloud that Izuku was playing. Excuse me, Midoriya. Iida says as Izuku walks into class. Yeah, Iida, what is it? Iida's eyes narrow as he says. I never told you my name. They said the last name of everyone when they completed the exams yesterday. I paid attention to whose name was connected to each person. Izuku says shrugging. Iida's eyes go back to normal as he accepts this response and says I simply wanted to apologize to you for calling you an idiot because you were participating in the exam despite being quirkless. You are a very skilled fighter and athletic and I want to compliment you on your skills. Izuku nods and says. Don't mention it if I hated everyone who called me a fool for fighting because I was quirkless. Then the only people I wouldn't hate would be my late mother, my tutor, Mina, and Uraraka. Iida's eyes widen as he says quietly. That many people judged you for being quirkless. Izuku looks off in the distance, a look of anger in his eyes as he says. The quirkless have no place in society. That's what I heard from nearly everyone every day of my life. The tones and words would change, but the meaning was always the same. I'm here to prove them all wrong. Iida nods as they enter the classroom. As they enter the classroom though all of class 1 minus Shode and Bakugo surround Izuku and start congratulating him. Wow, it's impressive how you beat all the tests, Kaminari says. Yeah, real manly you need to teach me how you did all that, Kirishima says. Impressive indeed. Tokoyami says from the back. Thank you Kaminari, Kirishima, Tokoyami. Though I must say some of your performances were also quite amazing and I would love to see more of how your quirks work. Izuku says, smiling at all the people there. Izawa then walks in and says. Alright all of you sit down in your seats. As Izuku takes his seat behind Mineta and in front of Bakugo. Why the fuck did I have to sit in front of fucking Bakugo of all people? Izuku thinks to himself as Izawa yanks him out of his thoughts by saying. Today you will have your first combat training session. Now all of you put on your hero outfits and follow me. I will introduce you to the combat trainer so I can get some sleep. Izuku goes into the restroom to change into his outfit, which is a pitch black suit covered in holsters and pouches that carries knives, flashbangs, tasers, and 2 custom sheaths for his 2 swords. There was also a note saying that they refused to add holsters for guns, but instead gave tasers. Izuku sighs as he sees this, noting that he is going to have to upgrade his stun gun to being a decent stun gun, rather than the shit taser they gave him. He however smiled to himself as he sees that they gave the special upgrades he asked for on the gear. As he walks out of the room he looks around at the rest of his class, who already had their costumes on. Dude, what are you wearing? Kaminari asks. Yeah, you look like a villain, Kirishima says. If I'm going to be a hero, I need a costume that will inspire fear in villains. I don't have quirks to rely on so I need to use other methods to take down villains if I don't kill them. Izuku says his rehearsed lie that Razor told him to say. I don't think it suits you, Momo says. I would think that you would want to be a hero that inspires people, Mina adds. Izuku shrugs and says. You work with what you got doesn't matter if I inspire people if I die in a few months. If you think you'll die in a few months then you should quit for your sake, Shode says, causing everyone to look at her. I've seen what happens when people are unprepared for this life and forced into it. Trust me, it's not pretty. Izuku nods and says. That's true, but I've trained more than enough to defeat most opponents, especially when I have my gear. Shode looks him up and down and says. I do not doubt that you have skill, but it will still take more to convince me that you are worthy of being a hero. Hey, be kind to him, it has to be hard to get into the hero program without a quirk, Toru says, perfectly playing her part as a hyper-kind person that she and Izuku discussed when discussing their roles as spies. Everyone pauses as they hear slight chuckling, and they all turn to find that the source is Izuku as he looks at Shode and says well then I shall work towards being your rival Miss Todoroki, though I must say that you must have really admired your father if you mimic him so much. Izuku grabs Shote's hand as she with an ice-cold glare and says. Never compare me to my father. Izuku blinks slightly and activates his memory viewer quirk. It was only due to his high levels of training that he didn't gasp as he saw Shote's history, the abuse of her mother and siblings at the hands of her father, the scolding of her face, and the death of her brother. Izuku barely stops himself from wincing as he gets a splitting migraine and he ceases his power and says keeping a smile plastered on his face, I promise I never will again compare you to your father. Shode nods, looks down, and says Izuku you seem to be having a nosebleed. Izuku looks down, grabs a tissue off of a nearby desk and says that's weird, that usually doesn't happen. Shode looks skeptical for a moment but then shrugs and then everyone leaves to follow Izawa. As the class follows Izawa to the combat arena they all hear. Have no fear for I am here. And a large blast of wind as All Might lands in front of them. All Might stands smiling and scanning the crowd until he sees Izuku. His smile twitches slightly but he reinforces his smile and says. That's right the rumors are true I will be your new combat instructor here at UA High. Now then, the exercise for today will be a simple 2v2 matchup within the interior of one of these fine buildings. One of the teams will play as the villains trying to protect the fake bomb that is within, while the other will play as the heroes attempting to capture the bomb. In order to make it more fair, the villain team is allowed 15 minutes inside the building to plan how to defend the bomb, while the hero team is allowed 5 minutes prep time before entering. All Might pauses, takes a breath, and continues. The teams will be divided into the following people. Team A. Izuku Midoriya and Ichako Uraraka. Team B. Sho Todoroki and Mizo Shoji. Team C. Momo Yaoi Rozu and Minoru Mineta. Team D. Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Iida. Team E. Yuga Aoyama and Mina Ashido. Team F. Rikito Sato and Koji Koda. Team G. Denki Kaminari and Kyo Kajiro. Team H. Fumika Tokoyami and Tsuyuasi. Team I. Masahiro Ujiro and Toru Hagakure. And Team J. Ijiro Kirishima and Hanta Siro. All Might walks over and grabs the table holding a box labeled villain and a box labeled hero. The first hero team will be Team D. Bakugo starts walking forward with Iida screaming after him for him to stop so they can have a plan. The villain team will be Team A. Izuku and Uraraka look at each other and nod, though Izuku's nod is slightly more confident than Uraraka's far less confident nod. Everyone else report to the observation room to watch the tests. All Might calls out. As Izuku and Uraraka start walking away towards the building, Izuku feels a large hand on his shoulder. "Hey, kid," All Might says. "How have you been doing?" Izuku turns around and subconsciously notices the fact that everyone is looking at him and All Might but glares knives of steel at All Might as he says. "Fuck you. You think you're forgiven just because you're going to be my fucking teacher? Well, you're so go fuck off unless you have fucking advice on how I can improve. Until that point, I don't want to see your goddamn fucking face." All of Class 1 is staring at Izuku in various levels of shock, disbelief, and confusion, as All Might says that's okay, but I just want to tell you I'm sorry. "Sorry?" Izuku yells. "You say I don't have a fucking chance in hell of being a hero, because I'm quirkless, and on top of that due to my conversation with you, I missed my mom's." Izuku pauses and takes a breath and hisses at All Might. "Unless you know someone who can bring people back from the fucking dead, I will never forgive you." Izuku turns and walks away towards the building where the bomb is, with Uraraka following him and asks. "Okay, what was that about?" "We met once when I asked him if I could be a hero without a quirk. He said that there wasn't any chance and that I should dream realistically and then just left me up on some goddamn rooftop. When I then returned home I realized that due to All Might leaving me up on that fucking rooftop, I missed my mother having a heart attack and dying. Who knows if I was there maybe anyway, let's just go do this stupid trial so I don't have to see that fuck's face for as long as possible." As Izuku starts walking towards the building slightly faster he notices that he stops sensing Uraraka's movement. He stops and turns around blinking in surprise as he sees Uraraka rushing towards him and hugging him. "I'm so sorry Izuku. If you ever need anything I promise I'll help in any way I can." Izuku blinks repeatedly and smiles and hugs Uraraka back and says. "Thank you." After a short pause Izuku lets go of Uraraka and says. "Now then, let's go kick the ass of the only other asshole I hate as much as All Might." 10 minutes later. "Bakugo, we have to devise some plan to work together otherwise we'll never find the bomb," Iida says exasperatedly. "Shut it extra. I'm going to beat that worthless Deku while you go find the bomb. How hard of a plan is that?" Bakugo yells at Iida. "The goal of this exercise is to capture the bomb, not fight the villains. Bakugo, if we just rush in there fighting all they have to do is stall for 15 minutes until our time's up and we lose." "Shut it Glasses," Bakugo yells. "My name is not Glasses, it is Tenya Iida," Iida yells back. "Hero team, your prep time has ended, the battle starts now." Bakugo looks at Iida and says, "Come on Glasses, let's go." Bakugo walks up and opens the front door, turns back and says. "I'll go in from the front to distract them, you go up to the 5th floor and come in from there. Hopefully, we won't see each other again, but if we do we meet on the 3rd floor directly in the middle." Iida is about to protest, but Bakugo closes the door before he can. "Idiot." Iida thinks to himself as he starts climbing up to the 5th floor. "They aren't even trying to be stealthy, are they?" Uraraka says. At least Iida is trying to be stealthy, but with his hero costume, he'd be better just running through the front door. Uraraka and Izuku watch their two opponents through a computer screen deployed on Izuku's arm. During their prep time, Izuku had explained to Uraraka the custom upgrades he had put into his costume, mainly focusing on the deployable cameras and smoke emitters which links with the computer in his suit. They had set up cameras covering every inch of the interior and exterior of the building. "We could just wait in here, right?" Uraraka asks. "I mean, we already removed the bomb, we don't have to fight them." "If we don't fight them they'll think something is up. I'll take on Bakugo while you get Iida." That sounds good. Uraraka blinks and says my power is gravity manipulation. How am I going to take on a speedster? Izuku hands Uraraka a knife from his belt and says. Here. Use this, it should keep him off balance until the clock runs out. Uraraka nods and says. Okay, then I'll see you soon. Uraraka starts towards the stairs while Izuku checks the computer and starts towards Bakugo. What do they mean they removed the bomb? Ribbit. Sayu asks. Now that they mentioned it, I do not see the bomb on the security cameras, Tokoyami says. Yeah, I don't see it either, Jiro says. Where is that bomb? All Might thinks to himself as he watches the screen. It still says on the tracker that it's near the building, so where is it? Bakugo walks slowly through the building looking for any sign of the bomb when he hears a slight hissing coming from around the corner. Bakugo smiles to himself and says. There you are, Deku. He yelled as he turned the corner only to see nothing there but smoke. The hell? Bakugo says as he feels a kick hit him right in between the ribs, sending him sprawling to the floor. I knew you'd fall for that, Izuku says as he stands over Bakugo. You're always so predictable, Kaken. You come rushing into any situation with little to no plan and then just follow your instincts till you fail, never doubting yourself as you go rushing forward. Shut it, Deku. Bakugo yells as he releases a large explosion from his right gauntlet, which Izuku does a backflip over as he kicks Bakugo on his shoulder blade, causing it to break as he once again sends him sprawling to the ground. Case in point, Kaken, you always attack with a right hook first. Honestly, you are so predictable that anyone with even the slightest level of training can outcompete you. Bakugo gets back up and yells fuck you, Deku. As he starts swinging at Izuku, wildly launching explosion after explosion at him. Meanwhile, Uraraka is wandering around on the 5th floor looking for Iida. Hamonichako, think if you were a hero searching for a bomb with no building layout, where would you look? Uraraka thinks to herself. She stops and thinks, wait, he's the one searching for the bomb, not me. I don't need to find him, I just have to wait for him to come to me. I'll just go to the center room and wait there till he shows up. Uraraka glances behind her as she goes to the center room and waits. Izuku effortlessly dodges all of the explosions using his perception quirk. After a bit of dodging, Izuku ducks back into the cover of the smoke. Stop hiding, Deku. I know you're in this smoke somewhere, I'll blast you out. Bakugo yells as he starts throwing explosions into the smoke. You'll never find me like that, Kaken. Izuku's voice comes from all around Bakugo, causing him to frantically look in all directions. Poor Kaken. Always acting without a thought. Someday that will really come back to bite you in the ass. Izuku says in a sing-songy voice that comes from all around the room as he quickly dashes out of the smoke and kicks Bakugo in the ass before disappearing back into the smoke. Bakugo looks around and seemingly coming up with an idea starts running out of the smoke. What's wrong, Kaken, too cowardly to face me? Izuku calls out from the smoke. DCH, like that's the case, nerd, I'm just going to get rid of your environmental advantage, Bakugo says as he raises his gauntlet towards the smoke. Finally found you, villain, Iida says as he walks into the room where Uraraka was waiting. Uraraka looks up from the ground and says with an evil smile. Took you long enough, hero. I've been waiting for you. Dang, Uraraka is good at acting. Iida thinks to himself as he says, come now, villain, tell me where you are keeping the bomb and I promise you'll get a reduced sentence. Never, you hero. Dang, what would a villain insult a hero as? Uraraka stumbles as she tries to think of something. According to my brother, the most common insult is calling them a cape. Iida helpfully says. Thanks, I mean take this, you cape. Uraraka says awkwardly as she rushes forward towards Iida. Surrender, villain, Iida yells as he uses his jets to launch himself toward Uraraka. Uraraka's eyes widened as she quickly ducked under a kick from Iida aimed at her head. Uraraka dodged and weaved away from Iida, not throwing a single attack as she panicked thinking about how she could hit someone moving so fast. Both of them suddenly had much bigger concerns as they felt the whole building shake, causing them both to fall over onto the ground. What the heck was that? They say simultaneously. Shit. Izuku says as he barely dodges out of the way of an incredibly large explosion coming from Bakugo's gauntlet. Oh, that hurt, Izuku says to himself as he rubs his back where he was slammed into the wall by the force of the explosion. Izuku looks down the hallway he was just standing in and thinks to himself. Well shit, there goes my smoke emitter. The smoke emitter, along with all of the smoke in the hallway, was completely cleared out by the explosion and likely forced outside via the giant hole in the wall. What you gonna do now, Deku? Bakugo yells at Izuku as he glares down at him. I'm going to show you why the quirkless can't be heroes. Bakugo screams at Izuku as he pulls back his fist for another large explosion. All Might's voice comes over the comms. Bakugo, I feel the need to point out that if you launch another explosion that size, I will have no choice but to interfere and give you a failing grade. What the fuck for? Bakugo yells. Heroes should always attempt to cause the least amount of collateral damage possible. By using another explosion that size there would be a substantial risk of the building collapsing and causing the deaths of both yourself, your fellow heroes, and the villains you are trying to arrest. All Might voice calmly tells Bakugo. Don't worry, All Might, he won't get off another explosion. Izuku says from the ground. What? Bakugo says, looking down at Izuku. What did you say to me, nerd? He leans down and attempts to grab Izuku, only to find his hands have grabbed nothing but air. The hell, Bakugo says as he steps back and looks around only to see four Izuku standing behind him, all with their swords out. I was hoping I wouldn't have to show off my special move before the UA tournament, but you forced me to show it now. That's impressive, Kaken. All four Izuku say simultaneously, but since you forced me to show it off with me on the ground, I might as well show the whole move off. All four Izuku smile as they say killer move. Fourfold funeral. All four Izukus rush towards Bakugo, who frantically tries launching an explosion at one of them, only for it to cease to exist, being replaced by an afterimage on the other side of the formation. What the hell? Bakugo screams as he is hit with sword slash after sword slash until he falls to the ground, a bloody, but breathing, mess. After Bakugo ceases moving at all besides shallow breaths, all of the Izukus form back into one Izuku. Ryu, that was a workout. Izuku says to himself, well, time to go help Uraraka. Izuku turns to walk away, but stops and looks back at Bakugo and sighs as he walks over and takes some of his capturing tape and wraps it around some of Bakugo's wounds. But as he does this, he leans into Bakugo's ear and whispers quietly enough to where even the microphones UA installed in their suits couldn't hear him. That's for all those years of bullying, you fucking asshole. As Izuku walks into the center room on the 5th floor, sword still in hand, he sees Uraraka and Iida engaged in intense combat, neither even noticing he walks into the room as they continue to fight. Uraraka dodges to the side to avoid a kick from Iida as she tries to swipe at him with the knife that Izuku gave her when the fight started. Iida in turn dodges the knife and attempts to grab it out of her hands, but fails due to having to dodge a kick from Uraraka aimed at his shins. Odd, they can't fight at all, can they? Izuku thinks to himself as he watches repeatedly bad attempts by both sides to even land a glancing hit on each other. You need to aim for where he's going to be, not where he currently is. Izuku calls out to Uraraka. Both Uraraka and Iida look over at Izuku in shock as he simply stands by the door holding his blade while taking out a cleaning cloth from a pouch. Izuku, come here and help me, he's really tough to hit. Uraraka says frantically. No, I won't, after all he is here and the bomb is elsewhere and Bakugo is not going to be moving for a while, so I think this is a good opportunity to have you learn some things about combat. After all, I can't have one of my friends die later on because I failed to teach them now. I can take both of you on at once, watch me, Iida says as he raises his fists once more. No, you can't, Iida, you already have a sprain in your left knee from overuse of your powers, and quite frankly, even with full control, you're still slower than me, so I would be able to do to you what I did to Bakugo very quickly, since you don't have any area attacks for me to worry about. Izuku says as he raises his blade to emphasize what he meant by what he did to Bakugo. I am simply going to play the role of a teacher mentoring a student for the rest of this. After all Might never said anything about the roles that the heroes or villains had to take. So all I'm going to do is stand here and give Uraraka advice on how to beat you, while also making sure you don't escape to search for the bomb. Izuku leans back against the wall and watches as Uraraka starts to attack Iida while he is distracted, swinging her knife wildly at him, which Iida successfully dodges. Ugh, no, you're doing it all wrong, you don't want to swing the knife randomly, you want to have controlled flowing movements that keep your enemy off balance, while also pushing them into a corner where they can't dodge anymore, Izuku instructs. You're not being very helpful, Izuku, Uraraka calls over as she still tries to desperately dodge Iida's attacks while trying to hit him. Okay, let me try it this way, if you swing at Iida's leg right now, what way will he dodge? How the hell should I know, Uraraka screams. He'll dodge right because you would be swinging at him from his left, you know what, never mind, I'll teach you how to fight later, for now just watch me. Izuku stops trying to explain and simply moves on to showing Uraraka what to do. Izuku quickly rushes forward, taking the knife out of Uraraka's hands and starts swinging at Iida. Iida barely dodges the attacks but is surprised at how fast and smooth the attacks are. With every swing, it comes closer to hitting him until it begins scratching his armor off. Oof. Iida groans as he slams into a wall. Surrender, you have nowhere to go, Izuku says as he holds out his blade. Iida looks behind him and notices he has been forced into the corner of the room. The true hero never gives up, Iida says with a look of defiance in his eyes. Izuku nods and resumes his assault, but with nowhere to move, Iida's tendons are quickly slashed and he is left on the floor a bleeding mess. Victory, villains. All Might's voice rings out over the intercoms, though I must ask, where did you put the bomb after all? We cannot find it in the building using our security cameras. Iida looks up from the floor in shock as he hears it wasn't even in the building. Uraraka, I believe you can stop now. Uraraka nods and she touches her hands together and says release. After a few seconds they hear a loud crash on the roof. You heroes are so unimaginative, you never think about the simple solution of looking around first to see if the bomb is outside the building. I mean, we waited for you and Bakugo to both be in visual range for at least a minute before we sent the bomb into the atmosphere, and yet you still didn't see it. Honestly, it's a bit insulting. It took a bit of brainstorming to come up with that idea. Izuku says as he walks over to Iida, leans down and picks him up onto his shoulder. Now then, let's get you to whoever the nurse on campus here is. Several minutes later, Izuku and Uraraka stand in the observation room with the rest of Class 1, minus Bakugo and Iida, who are currently at the nurse being healed. Let us first congratulate the villain team on winning the battle, even if they used unorthodox tactics. All Might says as everyone starts congratulating Izuku and Uraraka for their win. After a few moments, All Might continues, now then, can anyone tell me who had the most important impact on the battle? I would say Uraraka. Momo says. Please explain your reasoning. All Might says. Due to the fact that Uraraka was able to remove the bomb from the building and put it in a place where even if the heroes searched the whole building without any resistance they still wouldn't have found it, she effectively guaranteed a win for the villain team. Additionally, even if she was knocked out due to how her powers work, the bomb would have fallen to the ground and would have detonated, still allowing the villain's plan to succeed, even if the villains themselves happened to become casualties. The reason it wasn't Izuku despite his 2 combat victories was that due to the fact he could only be in one place at a time, he still needed to rely on Uraraka not to be defeated in order to keep the villain team alive. Crap, she said everything I was going to say. All Might thinks to himself. Yes, that is correct. You have very good observational skills, Miss Yaoirozu. All Might stammers out. Anyway, the next team prepare for combat. Izuku turns to watch the next fight, but he feels a hand on his shoulder. Izuku turns around and sees Shote standing over him as she says, that was very impressive, Izuku. Thanks. It is my understanding that you are next up for the fight. Shote nods and says, do not worry, I will surpass your performance, though I must admit that what you did was most impressive. Thank you, Izuku says as he bows down slightly. I look forward to watching your trial and perhaps sparring sometime later. Shote turns towards the door and says. I look forward to it. Izuku watches her exit and looks over at Toru, who is preparing for the fight, and slightly nods when he senses her looking at him. Beneath her invisibility, Toru nods and smiles back as she prepares for her fight. So what's the plan? Toru asks Ajiro in a hyper voice from inside a different building. I don't know, I mean, we know that Shote's quirk is ice, so maybe we prepare for that. Yeah, I can remove my costume and we can stealthily attack them before they can use their quirk. Yeah, that war, what the hell? Ajiro says as they both see a sheet of ice coming at them and freezing them in place. I'm stuck, Toru says as she looks around for anything to try to free her from the ice. She sees Shote walk towards them on top of the ice. Sorry about this, but you both seemingly got a bad matchup. She touches the bomb and All Might's voice rings out, victory hero team. That was impressive, Izuku says as he watches the screen with Uraraka and Mina. Yeah, I don't know if anyone could have defeated that, Uraraka says. I don't know about that, Mina probably could have with her ice or Bakugo with his explosions, but most of the rest of the class would have been screwed, Izuku says. Wait, you think I could have beat that, Mina says looking at Izuku. Well, assuming your acid could melt the ice, you could just cover the floor where you were trapped with it and be able to get out quickly enough to where Shote wouldn't notice you. Mina blushes as she hears this and says, oh thanks Izuku. Mina smiles and hugs Izuku, causing Izuku to blink again in surprise and the rest of the class to look at them. You're welcome, but I feel the need to let you know I can't breathe. Izuku choked out as Mina let go. He quickly touches her skin with his hand and activates his memory viewer quirk. To Izuku's shock, however, nothing happens. Izuku starts thinking of possible obstacles. Eraserhead is asleep and not in this room, so it can't be that. None of his classmates or All Might have the ability to nullify quirks. Was it something about Mina specifically, or was it a problem with his quirk, or was it that he didn't touch her long enough? As all these thoughts go through his head, he stares off into space with an unreadable expression on his face. Izuku does manage to stop his train of thought after a few more seconds, but since he paused for those few seconds, Mina believes it was for different reasons. You okay, Izuku? Mina asks, staring up at him in the face while leaning down under him. Oh yeah, I'm fine, Izuku stammers out as he starts blushing seeing Mina standing so close to him. Are you sure? You seem very out of it. Yeah, I'm sure. Izuku stammers out, blushing profusely. Should I have a crush on Mina? Izuku thinks to himself. If you say so, Izuku. Mina says, turning around and walking off with a bounce in her step. Izuku tries, and fails, to not stare at Mina as she leaves to prepare for her fight. So you like Mina, right? Uraraka's voice snaps Izuku out of his thoughts. How long have you? Is it that obvious? Izuku asks quietly. Hinda. I mean she seems to be the one person you aren't uber confident around. Izuku looks over at Uraraka and just slightly nods and says I'm sorry I kinda knew you had a bit of a crush on me and. That actually wasn't it. Uraraka says, causing Izuku to look at her in curiosity and surprise, you reminded me of my brother, he was quirkless like you and he died a few years ago from well what most quirkless die from these days. You just remind me of what he was before he became depressed. That's the reason I hanged around you. I'm sorry. Izuku says looking down at Uraraka. It's fine, it happened years ago, I moved on anyway, I hope that doesn't stop us from being friends. Izuku nods and says of course I'll be your friend, after all us future heroes have to stick together. Izuku smiles brightly while in the back of his mind throwing up slightly at the thought of being a hero, but Uraraka didn't seem like a hero type person, maybe they could recruit her before it's too late. Uraraka smiles back and says they both turn and watch the rest of the matches, together with Shote joining when she got back from her trial. Several hours later. What's this I hear about my cousin getting his first crush, Nana says as she brings over a case of beers towards Izuku as he sits down on the sofa. Really Toru, I thought you agreed to keep this a secret. Izuku calls over. After you beat us at Smash Bros so hard yesterday I felt a need to get back at you somehow, so now me and Nana get to tease you for the rest of the night. Toru calls over from the pantry where she's grabbing a snack for movie night. It's now my fault you both suck at Smash Bros. Izuku complains. Oh no, you ain't changing the topic that easily cuz. What does she look like? What's her personality like? Come on, give me something. Nana says, staring at Izuku as he looks around desperately for some distraction to get him out of this conversation. Please excuse the interruption, but we have a new assignment for Izuku and Toru, Kurogiri says as he walks into the room. Nana sighs and says saved by the bell cuz, but don't think I'm not going to get you to spill the beans when you come back. Izuku sighs as he gets up from the couch and walks over to the communication room with the TV. Hello uncle, I heard you have a new assignment for us, Izuku says as he and Toru enter the room. More accurately an expansion on the old one. AFO says we need you to go and obtain one of the schedules for Class 1A. Izuku nods, but Toru says might I ask sir why and how quickly we will need to get it. We need it preferably in the next few days, and we need it because we are going to be seeing just how much All Might is degenerated. AFO says. An attack on you, eh? Izuku asks as he steps forward slightly. That is correct, dear nephew. Are any of the students in Class 1 going to die because of this? No, we are going to be specifically giving orders not to kill or seriously injure any of the students. After all, it would be a waste of both time and effort to send you in as spies to corrupt the students and then kill them all before they have a chance to join us. Izuku nods and steps back and AFO continues, that is everything, you are both dismissed. And good luck with your mission. Oh, one more thing uncle. Izuku says. Yes Deku. Do you know if there was a limit on the memory viewer quirk about how it could and couldn't be used, because I was able to successfully use it on one of my classmates today, but I couldn't do it on a second one. Oh yes, the memory viewer can't be used more than once every 24 hours, otherwise the overload of memories would cause the user's brain to melt. Izuku nods and says thank you uncle, but why didn't you tell me earlier? You love studying quirks, dear nephew. I gave you 2 months to practice all your quirks, I figured you'd learn it on your own. Izuku nods and thinks to himself, yeah, that does sound like something I would do. Then turns to leave with Toru. As Izuku and Toru re-enter the main room they find that Nana has prepared the rest of the food for movie night and put in the disc for Lord of the Rings. Now then, before we start this movie we must first do an ancient ritual. Izuku, tell us about your crush. Izuku groans and sits down on the couch and says just start the movie, the thing is 3.5 hours long and we still have school tomorrow. Nana stares at Izuku and after a few minutes says fine, I have really wanted to see what this Lord of the Rings thing was about, but don't you dare think you're being let off the hook tomorrow, I don't care if I have to hang you in the air with meat hooks, you're telling me about your crush. Izuku groans as he says just turn on the movie. But as they watch the movie all Izuku can think of is Mina with her smile and bubbly attitude and her beautiful looks. After a certain point, Izuku stops even trying to pay attention to the movie and just sits and daydreams, much to the humor of Nana and Toru who are just watching him. Well, this should be entertaining to watch. Nana says as she stares at Izuku with a bowl of popcorn in her hand as she throws some popcorn in her mouth, very entertaining indeed. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.